you're going through quite a big steering angle, so you end up moving the main sheet an awful lot, and actually it just means you're a little bit quicker through the water, because you're quicker to react to the gusts, which means you keep the boat a lot flatter, and flat is fast. So at that point basically it's all about the kicker. Forget about the traveller, apart from obviously tacking. If you've got the heel forward, you need to make sure you let your kicker off, because it does sit about there. So unless you're particularly small or limber, you do need to let the kicker off. Cool. Yeah, so this is fitted. I've got 5 controls on the side of this one, and it used to be only like 3 on the older boats, and we've kind of added a few more fittings and a bit more rope, just to kind of, just to keep you interested. So a lot of people ask me what to do with the Inhaul, and for those of you who aren't aware, the Inhaul is the bit of string that goes from the tack ring. A lot of people essentially used to, and still do, just have a strop around the front of the mast, and it's fixed in its permanent position, and even previously it used to be pinned on the top of the boom. But the kind of way we build sails a little bit here now is to have a bit of adjustment there, because it actually affects, when I was talking earlier about the area which you steer to, it's pretty much, you take that second stripe just below that, but where that bottom batten is, that's where you're kind of looking at, and that telltale when you're actually, when you're trimming and when you're steering going upwind, isn't it? So, and that Inhaul has quite a big effect on the sail shape in that localized area, so it does affect how you point. So that's why we've kind of end up putting Inhauls on boats, and I'll just pull a bit of string on here. We'll just do it as an extreme, just to kind of show the point a little bit. I've just wound the outhaul on, and if you go along sail upwind with your Inhaul like that, you'll end up with an exceptionally flat sail, very low down. And this is a little bit extreme. Now, quite often actually what you see is how you should be sailing it is, on most sails there's kind of a natural cutaway from where the bolt rope ends and where the foot rope ends. It's naturally raised up a little bit, and it's raised back a little bit, and what we call that tack back and tack up essentially. So it's kind of sits in that floating area. So if I oh god, like this new boat, I don't even know which controls are. So if I wind that Inhaul on hard to the back of the rig, we're going upwind in the bloody rain. As an extreme sense, you see the shape on that bottom stripe here. If I let that off, it makes a massive difference. And I know it's, with the sails not filling, so it's a bit kind of it's a bit messy, but it almost acts like a little Cunningham in that lower area, and drags it drags the shape forward. So you can either set the boat up with quite a big angle, with lots of Inhaul on, and you sometimes want that if you're going to, not quite to this extreme, but what it does is if you're sailing in really choppy conditions, if you have a sail that's really flat off the mast, it's very sensitive to steering. It's quite hard work. What you want to do is make the sail a bit more forgiving for your steering. So excuse me. So by pulling on the Inhaul, again, not quite to this extent, but as an example, you add shape into the luff of the sail there, and you've got a much more forgiving sail shape to steer to, and your telltales won't instantly be going from I'm sailing too high to oh shit, I'm sailing too low, I'm sailing too high. You're steering all over the place. So it'll give you a much wider steering groove to sail to. With the Inhaul on like that. So if you see the shape off the back of the mast, if I let that off again, not great, but it's kind of a mixed bag, and it dryness or or winds.
All on tight, would you want to get more from the fire than the foot?
Yeah, so that's again the second half of it is once you've kind of set your you know, fucking controls.
This is the Cunningham. Don't tell you that that's the Cunningham's.
Yeah, so essentially this, before you kind of get up, just, you know, the Cunningham's on, before you even get to using the Cunningham, it's kind of acting as a bit of a mini Cunningham in itself.
I wonder what Cunningham on is rather less effective.
Yes, once you've got the Cunningham on, all it's doing then is a control of your foot tension along with your outhaul. So it's still a mixed bag, because, you know, you could be sailing. There's two, because your outhaul basically, we'll clean that off. Obviously, it affects the whole depth in the bottom of the sail, particularly up to your second batten, and it also affects the angle of this lower leach that it comes off. If you let the outhaul right off, fucking, I've run out of string. If you let the outhaul right off, what it does is it essentially hooks the lower leach, which in some conditions is what you're looking for if you're trying to sail very high. You need a little bit of hooking of this lower leach area to be able to point. And again, it's a very fine line between overdoing it and having a, you know, like a handbrake on. But example, you know, quite often people say when they want to point high, they flatten the sail off. Well, actually, if you want to sail high, you want to end up easing the outhaul to round up this lower leach, because what that does is it gives you weather helm, and you need weather helm to be able to point. So then it's the whole kind of balance of your outhaul position and your centerboard is to getting enough weather helm to be able to point the boat up into the breeze. So your inhaul then is a combination of flattening the foot. So when you get to the point where you're using Cunningham, you're tight on the outhaul. So what I do is the first kind of control. God, it's beautiful, isn't it? So it's a case of depowering. God, I'm losing my voice. The first thing I do is tighten the outhaul. And it's amazing how many people you see going out and it's windy and they're still sailing around and they're bloody struggling, and it's like the outhaul's like that. First thing, and don't be afraid to just wind that on. You know, that is how you should be sailing upwind in any kind of overpower conditions. Pretty much board flat.
You don't use the Ainsley fish stroke, right?
No. On a laser, that's probably the case. But on a solo, yeah, absolutely. Don't worry about doing that on a solo, because the sail's fully battened. It tends to keep quite a lot of shape anyway. So you can just afford to flatten this base of the sail off. If you know, and this is kind of a varies. If you're 70 kilos, you can be doing this in 10 knots, 8 knots. If you're 100 kilos, you're probably not doing that till 15, 18 knots. So that is the kind of instant thing of you're getting overpowered. And what I mean by overpowered is you can't keep the boat flat. You know, you're hiking your little arse out, and you got, you know, the old stomach muscles are shaking around. Flatten the outhaul is kind of first option, and then start pulling the Cunningham on. And if the sail was filling properly, you'd be able to notice that the Cunningham on modern sails, laminate sails, the Cunningham is actually powerful enough to bend the mast. Yeah. Because the sail doesn't stretch. You get a Dacron sail, or, you know, older sails, the material stretches. So you could pull the Cunningham on, and at the top of the beat, you'd probably have to put it on again to be in the same position as it was at the beginning of the beat, because it does stretch. Whereas you get a laminate sail, that doesn't happen. And it's really very, very effective way of depowering the sail, which is generally why sails are getting a little bit deeper, because they're becoming easier to depower. So it's kind of a flip side where you can keep the power in the low conditions, the lighter conditions, but when it gets windy, they're that much easier to depower. The other question I often get asked is, again with the Inhaul, is how I sort of rig it up. Again, I've always used this system. Some people have got different versions, but all I have is just a block. This is a bit of a rudimentary one on the side of the rig there. You can get a smaller one. The nice one is to get a little block with a becket on, so you can tie it flush to the side of the mast, just string it and tape it. So then you have your, make sure the boat doesn't go anywhere, just comes up, your control line comes up through the block, and ideally you kind of want that in this, on the side of the rig rather than in here, so you can make sure you get the tack right into the back of the mast if you need it. Up round through the eye of the sail, round the other side of the mast, so it's pulling the sail in as centrally as possible without it going to one side, and then just tying itself back off onto the block. And all I then do is the Cunningham. I go up to the Cunningham block and then tie it back onto where I've tied it on before. Because if I'm pulling Cunningham on, I've already got the Inhaul on tight, so it's not going to pull it up the mast. So it's pretty simple, but I know every time pretty much everyone says, how do you rig your Inhaul up? But that's kind of just a system that it works. You could probably do a tidier way, but I know it works, and I just, that's what I do really. So that's the Inhaul. As I said, the Cunningham then, once you've gone through the whole, I've pulled the outhaul on, still pretty overpowered. The Cunningham is then the really effective tool of depowering the sail.
All on first, cutting next.
Generally, yeah. And the only time sometimes, if you go through some really bad chop, sometimes the boat just feels a little bit dead, you can just drop a bit of outhaul off just to give it some grunt to get going again. But generally, if you've got enough breeze that the Cunningham's on, there's enough power in the rig anyway you might just let the Cunningham off again if you need a bit of power to accelerate again. But generally go outhaul on and then start depowering from there. So if I'm going upwind now, I'll kick her on, something like that. So if I try and set it up here, and one way of knowing, actually, the same principle applies if you've just got strop on the tack of your sail. It's a fine line of how much tension do you have it. The way to do it is pull your outhaul on. If you get a crease from the outhaul to your Cunningham, or where the bottom of the luff rope stops, it means your Inhaul's too loose, because you want that crease running right along the bottom of the sail and not going up to where the Cunningham block is. And you just want to keep your Inhaul tight enough so that when you do that, that's the crease is down the bottom here. Because I'll show you, as an example, if you kind of do that, there you go, it means your Inhaul's too loose. Yeah, that's your base bit. So you just want to snug your Inhaul on again. You could probably get away with a bit more than that, actually. There you go, something like that. There you go, and you've got the crease running along the foot, and that's kind of your stock setting then. Now the one nice thing about the Inhaul is when adjustable Inhaul is that when you go downwind and the boom goes up in the air and the sail kind of rises up the mast again, your Cunningham's off, all this kind of stuff, is that by popping the Inhaul off, it then allows it to sit in that sort of neutral floating position and doesn't act like a little Cunningham on the sail. Because obviously you go downwind, you want to let the Cunningham off, get as much shape in the sail. The Inhaul does have that effect a little bit if you can't fully let it off. So that's the one big bonus of having an adjustable Inhaul is the downhaul section. So going upwind, this is pretty much how I'll be sailing. Traveller in the middle, and flat, so breezy conditions. If I'm sailing with the kicker, it means it's generally a little bit of breeze. So outhaul's on. The next real control, which I'm saying is the key one here, is the centerboard. So if you get to this point and you've still got a lot of helm, or you're struggling to go fast, it'll be because you've got too much centerboard down, 99% of the time. And what I say to people is a good kind of as a good little test is go upwind and just pull your board up to an extreme, you know, put it half up, and you feel the boat go completely light, and then edge it back down until you get that bite. As an example, say it's all about sort of weather helm. It's the same in any kind of boat. Every boat's, they try and set, you know, if you talk about angles, 3 or 4 degrees of weather helm, of rudder angle, is kind of the optimum angle between getting lift and having too much angle and having drag. So you're always trying to set that, so that is just enough that you can feel it the whole time in feel terms, without getting a heavy, you know, a bloody heavy arm. So that's what you're trying to do the whole time, is get the boat sailing along with that amount of feel. And if you can get it sailing with the boat flat, that's one crucial thing, is people think they're sailing the boat flat and they're not. So the crucial thing is to sail the boat dead flat, look at the corners, you know, when you're going upwind, when you hike it out, see how high your corners are above the waterline. You can sort of get a good feel of how level it is. And then you can get a feel for true weather helm. And if you've got too much, let's say, just as a little, next time you go out in 25 knots, just as an exercise, pull the board right up and then just gradually put it back down again. And that's, say, this is probably the reverse of some people's systems, that I've got a control to pull the centerboard up as opposed to pull it back down again. I have this bungee return so that, you know, when I go around the leeward mark, I can uncleat that and it pulls the board back down again. But as soon as, if I get even to the point where if it's a big gust and I can see it's coming, I'll pull the board up a couple of inches before I get to it, and it means when the breeze hits you, the boat's fairly neutral and you accelerate rather than heeling, going sideways, slowing down. And it's probably so it's the biggest control, biggest factor for getting the boat going upwind fast, once you've got everything else kind of settled down, is playing around with your centerboard, because it's just so massive. It has a huge effect on the boat.
If it's really windy, would you have the centerboard in the same position going upwind and downwind?
Not quite. I mean, there's still a couple of inches more. I'd probably take it. You know, you would never get to sort of like half board. You'd end up sailing on a reach, you know, with sort of half board, I'd say, if it's really howling, and a run as well. You don't quite get to that sort of position with a upwind. So it's a complete role reversal in the light airs when you're looking for weather helm. That's where this is actually a brand new board I picked up from the boat builders on Thursday, so I haven't marked it, but one of the things you should do is mark your centerboard, so you know when your vertical edge is, or your leading edge is vertical, and when your trailing edge is vertical, because that's your kind of light air centerboard settings. Because obviously, just like, you know, you're losing board in the windy conditions, in the light airs you want the board right down to get essentially the mast and the centerboard as close as possible to increase your weather helm. So you'll end up in the very light conditions sailing with your leading edge vertical, which means your trailing edge is forward of vertical, to get some helm. But be very, it doesn't take very much breeze. It'll only be 5 or 6 knots till you're already starting to raise it up a bit to have, you know, your trailing edge vertical, and then you go up from there in little stages. So if you roll your boat on the side and you can just mark it off, you know, trailing edge vertical, leading edge vertical, 1, 2, 3, and you can sort of see then instantly where you've got an easy kind of board position. And it's just about making it simple for yourself, so you don't have to wonder, or, you know, you sail upwind looking over the side, oh yeah, it's about vertical breeze, and it'll go straight up again. So as you're going into the tack, I'll grab the kicker and I'll literally be sailing along like that with the steering, if I'm going on port, steering hand, main sheet, I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, right, there's a boat here, I want to lee bow tack, and I'll go, ideally is start to put the helm down release an armful of kicker, and pretty much as I get, again, gauge it on your own boat, but where that double grot there, once that's kind of level with the deck, I know I can get under the boom. Obviously you need to check that for your own boat, but I know that's enough for me to get under the boom.
Just quickly recleat
it, come out the tack. Now the quickest way to tack, or quickest way out of a tack, is, once you've gone through the wind, is to get straight back onto the kicker, because you'll end up, the leech, because you've let the kicker off, the leech will be quite open, and it's quicker to have the boom out while you pull the kicker back on again than it is to pull your main sheet in with the kicker, with the leech open, and then start fanning around with the kicker. So if you come out the tack, so I've come out through the tack, the kicker's off, and because you've let the main sheet out through the tack, the boom will be out here somewhere. The first thing I'll do is grab an arm of kicker, and essentially the boat will accelerate an awful lot quicker with that leech tension on, and then because the boom's out nicely as well, the boat accelerates, and then you can sheet in properly once you're up to speed.
Readjust the kicker if you feel you need to.
Yeah, so it's just it's really it's a massive difference if you can come out and get a bit of kicker straight on again, because it just controls your leech, and your boom sits out here, and it's just great for the boat to accelerate, especially in chop. Makes a big difference. So obviously if it's light airs, you've got the traveller down, it's that much easier because there's no kicker on. The boom's generally a bit higher anyway. You can sheet it on a bit, the boat tacks through nicely. As you let the main sheet in to go through the tack, it automatically rises up anyway, and as you come out the other side, obviously the boom's out because your traveller's down the track, and you can just sheet back on again and control your leak with the main sheet. So yeah, it happens to everybody. Yeah,
I've got to read that bit in the instructions.
Yeah. So that's pretty much as the kind of setup goes.
Do you use the traveller at all in a breeze? Or do you always keep it on the centre?
Just keep it in the centre. I just forget about it.
Even to die in this sort of wind, if you're 8, you will still leave it in the middle.
Yeah, because all I'm looking to do is the kicker, and the main sheet is controlling the angle. So the kicker's there to control the leech. As an extreme, you can see it. It's pretty bloody powerful. You can you can see quite a lot of bend in the main, in the boom. That's probably a bit extreme, but you can see by that how much the mast is moving. If I pull that,
certainly with your 10mm chock on, that's way hard onto the chop.
Yeah.
Charlie, can you just explain a bit about the D+? Because I know obviously the D+ is different from a
So a D+ is kind of a the stock rig, if you like. It's it used to be the Cumulus was kind of the rig for the heavier guys. The nice thing about the D+ is it's quite similar to the Cumulus, to the Hounds, but then it's quite a bit softer above the Hounds, so it means that the Cumulus is a bit of a telegraph pole relatively, and it's great on flat water, but you get out in the chop and it just feels a bit sticky, whereas a D+, the top will move enough so when you hit the waves it will just move, and it'll be a bit more dynamic than a Cumulus would. Obviously the nice thing about it is, I think originally people thought you could only use this if you were 80 plus kilos, whereas actually Steve Dennison, who many of you know, I think he's gone a hell of a lot quicker since he's used a D+ than he has when he's used softer rigs. And I think it's a twofold thing, where it's stiffer in the lighter conditions, so being a light fella, he's powered up that much quicker, and that's that much earlier. But actually, because the sails have kind of come on a bit, the whole thing about being able to depower easier, he can sort of hold on in the breeze like he did with it before with the softer rig. So but it is a fine balance between having a stiffer end of the spectrum, which this one is, down to like the needle spar rigs, which a lot of you guys have here, which are obviously designed to be work for you by moving that much more, without you having to sort of trim the mainsail. The downside to them is, because they're working for you independently, you can't control them as much. So it's a flip side, whereas in the breeze they're quite good because you can kind of sit there and it will just truck along quite nicely doing your own thing, and you don't have to play the main sheet, which is great. But equally in the God, this is miserable. In the in the medium conditions where you want the power, you can't really do anything with them to power them up. So it's very much a flip side on which end of the spectrum. The same with the wavelength rigs as well. They're super soft, which, if you've got a big deep sail and it's 10 knots, perfect. But if you go to 20 knots and they're almost uncontrollably, they're moving around almost uncontrollably, and the same with the light airs when you need a stiffer rig to power up. So it's a bit of a fine line between having something that works for you and makes it a little bit more easier upwind in the medium conditions, to having something you want to be able to play around with and power up when you can.
What's the difference between the M7 and the D+?
Not an awful lot. They're pretty similar. The D+ is, I think, it's a fraction stiffer, but only a. No, not a new M7. I've tried an M2, which I just started trying, which is a telegraph pole. That is a bit of a beast. In fact, I put a sleeve in it first of all, and it was just like, because what I was trying to do was produce a D+ that didn't bend so much low down. So as an example, if you take all the fins and stuff you see out and about, they bend test their rigs, they're all custom rigs, and they're down to the millimetre. And essentially what you want is a mast that's softer in the top quarter than you do in the bottom quarter, so that the top of the mast moves around a little bit more, helps depower you when you go over waves, all that kind of stuff. A solo rig is exactly the opposite way around. So it's softer in the bottom quarter than it is in the top quarter. And so I did a bend test with these rigs like a fin mast, and if you hang a weight off the end and support the bottom, and if you take the quarter offsets, if you like, if you take the quarters as a percentage of the maximum offset, they're almost exactly the reversal of what you're kind of looking for. So I was trying to get something that was stiffer low down, yeah, pretty much, but by putting the sleeve in low down, that pretty much took out all the mast bend that you ever get. So a lot of the tip bend comes from the mast deflecting low down here. So Will's just asked if I can just talk about body position, kind of where I sit and hike or try to hike. So stock position, pretty much going upwind anyway, is in hike. So if you take sort of 10 knots, you've got your feet in the straps. I'm pretty much sat maybe an inch behind the traveller, 1.5 inches, 2 inches. So I'm in this kind of position here. It's pretty much straight on with the boat. A nice thing in the lighter conditions, if you've getting your feet in the straps and clamping your feet down to the bottom of the boat when you're just sitting on the side, because it means every movement you make goes straight into the boat and obviously straight into the rig. So obviously you have to be careful because of the whole, pumping and eaching kind of thing. But it does mean that you're much more clamped into the boat and your body movements are. When you start hiking, obviously you need to let these off and get your feet out and start working a bit. And as you do that, you kind of end up moving aft, an inch or two, just generally because the windier it gets, there's a few more waves, and you want to, the bow does go down a little bit, but equally your upper body is moving quite a lot, so you're moving backwards and forwards, so you end up with your legs fairly, your legs and your lower half of your body fairly steady, but your body is moving, above your waist is moving quite a lot forwards. When you're going up, you're coming up over a wave, you're trying to get the bow down the front, so you're moving your your body forward, and then vice versa when you're going up a wave or when you're coming down into a wave, you want to go back to help the bow comes up, and obviously in and out as and when gusts happen. In the lighter conditions, you kind of end up, if you're sat in the boat, I end up sort of sitting pretty much up to the cleat here, so half on the traveller. You just want to be a bit careful, especially when us on the slightly larger sizes. If you get really far forward, you just get a real blunt bow in the water. Yes, you're trying to get the transom out, but it's a bit of a fine line. If you're a bit of a flyweight and the boat's a little bit further out the water, you can edge a little bit further forward. But I'm always a little nervous of getting too far forward in the boat. Even downwind, if it's really light downwind, I might get a leg in front of the traveller, but it's pretty miserable sailing conditions when you do that. So that's pretty much as far forward as you go. Downwind, it makes a massive difference getting the boat, your weight back in the boat, especially on a reach. So I end up kind of as a level position, so the end of the tiller's about here, on an average kind of rudder stock, your end of your tiller's about this position, and I'm pretty much in line with that as soon as the boat's planing. So you end up going quite back quite early, and the same downwind on a run. If it's windy and you're steering through the waves, you tend, you're moving backwards and forwards a little bit, but you tend to be kind of at the back of the case position, to the point where actually when it is windy, I'm kind of sat one leg down, one leg on a run, when you obviously you don't need the righting moment on the side of the boat. I've sort of one knee down, one butt cheek on the side here, and I tend to be steering pretty much holding the bottom of the tiller extension where it joins the tiller. So you end up being in this sort of position here.
Is there anything leeward knee down?
Yeah, so leeward knee's sort of crouched, so I'm kind of like that, sort of steering, if you like.
I always get my legs stuck under the tiller.
Okay, I think if you angle it, okay, yeah, if you keep it bent and kind of cramped down here, you get a bit stuck up. But there is a challenge. So yes, you end up kind of being quite that way. You're quite mobile as well. So if you do feel too far aft, you've got your foot there. You can kind of slide your body foot, forward and backwards, because again that makes quite a lot of difference, especially at hailing. You've got some big waves going down the run. If you just slide forward, it just gets the bow over the top of it and you're off again, rather than just kind of you're just trying to get on the edge of it and then you slide off the back of it and then it's all.
Charlie, have you ever had a rear toe strap?
Yes, and I've just this being the first boat, what they did doesn't quite work. So
Will you put one in?
Yes, so on this one I was going to have a central one.
Got the hook here.
Yeah, it's a long story. Anyway, there isn't at the moment, but yes, usually either on the boom boats I know they have split ones. On the winders sometimes they're longer ones anyway, so you don't need the aft ones. Or if you're slightly longer legs, you can have one central toe strap. But I hardly ever use both feet in the aft toe straps. I usually end up with one foot under there and then the aft one in an aft strap. So
your nemesis Matt Howard uses non-slip on the pro grip on the on the decks. You're not going in for that.
Oh, I will do, yeah. Again, it's one of those things, you kind of have a nice shiny boat and it just means it's quite slippery, but especially on reaches, if it's rough, you end up if it's slippy, you end up you're getting dragged around the boat a little bit. So you can use pro grip or any kind of that sort of sticky foam backed or foam sticky backed sort of material stick on the side decks. It just gives you a little bit of grip. And the nice thing is, if you have it, the best position is to have it in this hiking position here, because again, when you're going upwind and it's big waves and big wind, the boat's going up and down an awful lot, and it's really easy, depending on what kit you've got, just to be sliding around, and it just keeps you kind of locked in a bit more when you're hiking.